¿Cómo está? Bienvenido a la jugada
Sin
crítica de
audio.
Telesur. Un conflicto que aún no llega a su fin. Una
tengo
confrontación que más allá de lo meramente político tiene raíces en la cultura de los pueblos que habitan esa zona.
The people that are in that zone. What does it depend on the east of Ukraine? Now let's see what the efforts are of Normandy in the recent encounter with them. Let's begin this. This is what the maximum representatives of the two main actors said between Russia and Ukraine. The process to find the ceasefire should be synchronized with the legal reforms in Ukraine that are foreseen in the agreement. First of all, this means to introduce changes in the constitution that will give Donbass a special status. The agreement of the special area of Donbass should be expanded. And finally, the law should be permanent, just like the Minsk agreement said. During the conversation, we supported the idea to have an exchange of prisoners. Another important point is that there should be an increase of the control points in the border. There should be more comfortable situations so there can be the passage through the control points. The first thing that we agreed was immediate measures to stabilize the security at the east of Ukraine. This means a real ceasefire, complete and permanent. This should begin at the end of 2019. I would like to describe some principles that I go with. First of all, there is no possibility to federalization. Ukraine is a unitarian country, and there cannot be a compromise on a different situation. For all of the Ukrainians, all Crimea and Donbas are still Ukraine. And this is what both representatives of these mediator countries spoke. Let's listen to Emmanuel Macron and then Angela Merkel, who is the Prime Minister of Germany. I had the opportunity to speak of the situation in recent days, the security of the continent, and to bring forward a new structure of confidence needs to have a new agreement. The conversations went on these things: ceasefire, exchange of prisoners, and the trust between two countries. And we also set forth an agenda for the next 4 months, which consists in creating political connections with the objective of having a new summit. I say very openly that we have a lot of work ahead, but my sensation of this meeting is that there is goodwill to solve difficult questions, and this goodwill is always necessary if you want to solve political problems in this sense. I can say that regardless of all of the problems, I am very satisfied with this meeting. Through the meeting and the suggestions that President Zelensky has proposed, we can give this document a new movement and elasticity. We could bring it to life. This is the step we have done today, and now we need to keep on working very, very hard. There is no doubt about it. But we have created a new framework. In this bilateral dialogue, we said that we expect that Russia cooperates with us and gives us the information they have. This is what we expect at this moment. We have a suspicion that is being inspected by the Federal Prosecutor General. And this is what I said to the President of Russia. I expected the Russian counterpart give us that information, and I hope, and that's what I expect. How about if we locate geographically this location? It's called the Donbass.
Donbass.
Donbass. Donbass is created by the word Donetski Basin, is talking about a river that passes through this area. Both countries of Russia and Ukraine doesn't have a clear border, but it has the part of Donetsk and Lugansk, Ukraine, and the south of Russia. The Donbass used to be the traditional border. From back in the area of the empire, there are Ukrainian people that speak Ukrainian, while in the cities there are people who speak Russian and have strong ties to that country. To have an idea, according to 2001, the languages that are spoken are the Russian in 74.9% and the Ukrainian only 24.1%. The part of the Donetsk has been very rich, where they can find industrial fishing, a zone of carbon mining, metal extraction, and artsita, and they have. And these are the extraction activity that they have. Although since 1970 there has been a diminution of the carbon extraction. All of this is done down many kilometers, while the mining of anthracita and ulia brumosa is done 1,800 meters down. Ever since 2014, great areas of Donbass has been in a dispute. This set the basis for an independence movement that is pro-Russian, and it's a government post-revolutionary of Ukraine. Up until this conflict, the Donbass was the most dense populated area, apart from Kiev, that is the capital city. But let's go over what has happened in this Quartet of Normandy. The summit of the Normandy summit that was held in September now finished with a conjoint declaration. Germany, France, Ukraine, and Russia reaffirmed the Minsk agreement that was done in 2014. The format agrees the ceasefire in Donbass. It also supports the trilateral contact mission that is done by Ukraine, Russia, and the Organization for the European Security. There should be a division of Donbass in 3 areas by the end of next year. Likewise, the quartet agreed everything that has to do to giving a self-determination local level to some areas. This to try to agree a permanent functioning, while they try to have a new exchange of prisoners that will be held on December 24th. And as always, we're going to go see digital websites. For example, what does Sputnik say? This is from December 9. Crimea asked Yeltsin not to give it to Ukraine in 1991. In 1991, after the fall of the USSR, the areas of Crimea asked the then President Yeltsin to keep them as part of Russia and not to give them to Ukraine. This is what the chief administration said. He was Sergei Filatov. When asked if the president need to insist on the negotiations to see if they could have a referendum, Filat said that the team of Yeltsin had no time to deal with the situation because there were other priorities. Crimea left Ukraine and was reincorporated to Russia in 2014 when there was a referendum where the majority supported this position. Kiev says that Crimea is a Ukrainian area that is temporarily occupied. Another element that we should bear in mind is from Newsfront. Let's read part of this text. The title is Hungary says that it will stop Ukraine from being part of NATO because of the law of languages they have. They should bring down that law that they have because they have too many languages. They said that the Ukraine had violated 151 Ukrainians that live in the area. Language is something very important, and that they lose identity should they not respect it. The Venice Commission, that is a commission from the European Union, asked Kiev to guarantee Ukraine that they teach Hungarian and Roman. President Zelensky said that Ukraine was following the Commission's recommendations and that they withheld the opinions of the minorities. They say, on the other side, they say that there is a discrimination against the people in Ukraine. In February, the Ukrainian parliament ratified the modifications to the constitution with the objective to hold a foreign policy. However, there will be some obstacles before this is considered seriously. In 2016, they said that there would be 25 years between Ukraine could join NATO and the European Union. I'd like to suggest some article that is of December 10 of Prensa Latina that says President Zelensky between the drama and the peace of the Donbass. It says that the Quartet of Normandy apparently set up a dilemma for President Zelensky, and they're going to either they please one or please another one. So is he willing to leave the nationalist rhetoric and go forward with the Minsk agreements? This was almost answered with the former comedian's answer in Paris. He said that all of the parties are obligated to go through with what was agreed. And what he said was that there are territories that are occupied, and they forget the recent dilemma that happened in April of 2014. Zelensky says that he would not accept that there should be a special status for Donbass and to hold elections. Zelensky spoke in Russian and said that his country was never forbidden to speak in that language. But in 2020, all of the schools of Russian were eliminated. And everybody had to use the Ukrainian language in a country where 75% are considered Russian-speaking, and there was a prohibition of TV and newspaper, everything saying that Russia was annihilating their identity. This divides this position. There is a necessary put an end, a cease to what is going on. This was all signed in Paris by the Quartet of Normandy. Putin insisted that there should be no change in the Minsk agreements and that they should go through with their agreements. Zelensky on the other side said that the only violator of these agreements is Kiev. Let's go to our first pause, but before we have a question, so you can participate with us and you can give us your opinion. This is our critical move for today. Saying that Ukraine is only one and considering Crimea as a temporarily occupied territory by Russia, we ask ourselves, will Kiev agree the ceasefire that was set forward by the Quartet of Normandy? Let's go to our pause.
infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice. The American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
To what date does this conflict go back? Let's do a brief timeline. In February 2018, the then president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, reaffirmed the law to reincorporate Donbas, saying that Russia was an aggressor government, and they wanted to attack the independent Republic of Donbas that he did not recognize. The president had overtaken the government with a coup d'état. In March of that year, there was a manifestation in pro-Russian against the Ukrainian government, and this turned into a warmed and weapons-armed conflict. Then there was a summit with Russia, Crimea, and Germany to find a solution to this conflict. And this is where the Quartet of Normandy began. Originally, they began dialoguing through TV, during telephone, and then the next meeting was held in 16 and 17 October in Italy. Then the next one was in February 2012 in Minsk in Belarusia, and there was a signing of an agreement called the Minsk Agreement. Then there was a Kiev statement saying that some armed forces of NATO were overflowing Donbas. And then Russia put forward an offering to give them an easy way to come in to Russia, giving them the citizenship. Then the Ukraine President Zelensky in United Nations said that he was making the conflict even worse in Donbas. Let's begin with our first part of analysis. We have San Gil de San Vicente from Spain, and then Dr. Carmona from Mexico. Welcome both of you to our space. Let's start with Iñaki. Apparently, there is no definition on the peace of the East Ukraine after this meeting in Paris of the Quartet of Normandy. No, the last word is not said. This will take some time, but the general dynamic of the problems in Europe and Eurasia is aimed with a lot of aimed at trying to stop any war between Ukraine and Russia. So I think that the evolution of the last years goes to the fact that the European Union, in this problem that is trying to be solved by President Macron and followed by Germany, what they're doing is to have measures to set a distance with the Donald Trump's policy. President Zelensky, when he took the government in April, he noticed that the east of Ukraine, the economic situation was terrible. It was rotten. and that it had an entry of what could be called a criminal policy. They were becoming a puppet of the imperialism, and they were going to be instruments of imperialism. And there are Nazi battalions that they have strongholds in Ukraine. So he saw that this was unsustainable. So with a majority and with a lot of diplomacy, much more than he thought that people thought they would have, because he was a comedian and they thought that he was going to have it, but he has been able to unblock problems and to solve some situations that they had. And the last thing that he did was having this to face what Donald Trump was asking with this quid pro quo. And to finish, the situation of Russia is very clear in this moment. They have a lot of the cards in their hands, and they have the possibility to win if they have the control of East Ukraine. And of course, they have their backs up with China. Zelensky has tried ever since this summer, since October of this year, to win the confidence of the east of Ukraine, of Donbass and other zones, promising economic investments and trying to find investors to reactivate the economy at the east of Ukraine. To end up, it was been Russia, and there is a situation of melting down. So it's important to see what the answer of the United States will be. So now you can see that little by little, we can say that the conversations at the international level will continue. Well, United States, I want to reflect with you in a while. Now I want to speak with Ernesto Carmona. He is with us from Mexico, and I want to ask, what are the factors that have made it possible that we are now with a conflict of Donbass with no resolution? What are the external and internal factors? You tell us. Well, from the beginning of the Ukrainian conflict, the intermission of the different regions at the interior of Ukraine has been definite, so there will be no way out. Of course, this has to do with internal factors, but this intermission in the ambition of control of this area is also due to the geolocation that is strategical, and the possibility for this territory be controlled completely by a pro-Russian position. This set off the alarms. And this brought forth the Euromaidan, and now there is a group in power that would be more pro-European. And this confrontation, United States and the European Union still didn't suffer this distancing that they've had ever since Trump took office. And of course, it had the support of the United States. And this made it that there is a complete clash between the police. On one hand, there was the president, who was looking with better eyes an alliance with Russia, and on the other hand, there was a movement that decided to stay far away from Russia, because it's important to remember that they think that Russia is this empire that threats and that could take over them, and that could invade them, and of course has a great influence. And what they did was to find well, now it's important to bear in mind two factors that are important that have to do with the East Ukrainian history and their interaction with Russia. At some point, it was the action with Ukraine. And of course, it was the grain producer of Ukraine, and of course, it was the supplier of carbon. And on the other hand is that Ukraine can become the gas provider for Russia and Europe. How have this influenced in the historical factors and the dispute between both countries? Well, the natural resources are a great source of dispute. Of course, at some point it could have been agriculture, that it has to do with food security. And now it's the topic of energies. So what Iñaki is saying now is that maybe they're trying to reduce the purchase of gas, and what they also want to do is that they cannot buy from any nationality. And of course, these other companies that are external to the mainframe would not have any markets. This is important because Russia and China are going to have a gas pipeline. And this conflict is going to be a bit more at ease because they don't have that factor of pressure over Russia. So this could make it that Europe could have more disposition to negotiate with Russia. Thank you, Ernesto. Let's go to Iñaki. This is the participation of the U.S. throughout these years in this conflict in Donbass. We had spoken a little bit about this, and Ernesto has also said some. So in this aspect, I wanted to speak about it like West, and fundamentally, the United States has been totally present in Ukraine, in today's Ukraine. Well, the United States has been present in Ukraine almost 1948, 49. NATO, immediately after finishing Second World War II, they began to work in the Western countries of Europe and Ukraine too. And what they did was to take secrets, so they could avoid for the Nazi movements to reactivate. And what I can say is that the Western policies have forgotten all of their diplomacy. So there was what they did was something like what they did in Cuba. And after the attack in Cuba, well, now Ukraine tried to activate a civil war, thinking of what could happen. The answer, and this is very important, the answer of Russia is to make Ukraine not only the wheat collection, but we also have some other part of Ukraine that would be incorporated in the United Nations plan. And this brought a lot of interest in the east of Ukraine. And this made that the labor force at the east of Ukraine was highly qualified. And when they used neoliberalism in a savage way, the working classes set on strike, and originally there was support of the people, and we knew that we were going to be still controlled by Russia.
quería. Europa organizó y preparó la desindustrialización de Ucrania y sobre todo la desindustrialización del este de Ucrania. Y el este de Ucrania,
And in the east of Ukraine, there was some interference by the U.S. because it's been permanent. In the United States, independently that Trump is president or not, the thing is that when the Financial Times said the hegemony not only of the U.S., but of other countries, he said that even if the Trump administration was ousted from the government and a Democratic administration came forth, let's not forget that it was Obama who was helping so they could end up with the Ukrainians. So we have no trust, and we shouldn't have any trust on the fact that maybe his affinity has something to do. United States will just have to accept how they lose one of the possibilities to have an anchor in the United States. Well, I just want to comment this. Thank you, Iñaki. There are two elements that we should highlight for our next analysis. Iñaki said that one, the antecedents of what happened now is not Trump the author of all of this. On the contrary, Obama goes back to this administration, and Iñaki wants to participate on what's going on, and
era una zona altamente industrializada, pero industrializada justamente por la Unión Soviética. Al tener esa mano de obra cualificada,
when they have this qualified hand labor, this is when Europe said, I want it for myself. And this is why it's understandable why the east of Ukraine is asked to have their hearts on Russia more than on Kiev. Well, thank you to both of my guests. It's been very important. Let's go to a second pause. Let me remind you that there's a question that is on internet, so you can participate with us. If you understand that Ukraine is only one and Crimea are temporarily occupied, do you think there's going to be any result? When we're back after our pause, we will be speaking with my guest. How is Ukraine seen in the international frame? Our former guests already spoke a little bit about it, but we have a topic that we have to highlight. Ukraine is very important strategically because historically they have been considered the provider of grain. They have exported grains to European Union, Middle East, and mainly Russia. The limits were first defined in the 90s. However, it's hard to find a common identity. So the country is divided between the east and the western areas. After the USSR left, it was thought that they would have relationships with Russia. But there was some problems because of the border. Due to the geographical area, it's been an axis from Russia to Europe. There's been some discussions, and what Russia thinks that what Crimea is asking for is unacceptable. So now Russia is blocking economically, and however the economic measures will be hard on them. However, in 2020, In 2004, there was an electoral crisis that there had to be a second round, and the winner was Viktor Yushchenko, and he did not want the country to be part of some international organisms. During the second law, people went with NATO, and they thought that that was the only thing that could save them from the Russian invasion. Well, how old is... These are geopolitical aspects that will help us in our next dialogue. We're going to speak with an analyst. He's been with us before. Martin, we were speaking behind cameras. Ukraine is not only one. Ukraine is the addition of several pieces that used to be part of the Russian area, and a part that's been annexed after the Second World War II. So it's totally different, and there's a mixture of Russian part and the Catholic part. It's Ukraine is a mixture of cultures. And what we can say is that very close to what today is Ukraine, there are parts that are not all perfect, because everything is the addition of migratory movements that have been constructing an identity and not recognizing other identities, and some conflicts that sometimes seem to end, but they never really do. What happened with the Ottoman Empire, and now these. And yes, people do live okay in peace, but sometimes the flare reappears. In 1991, when the USSR falls, with what now is understood, what we think of as Russia, Crimea and Donetsk asked the government, didn't want to be part of Ukraine. They want to be part of Russia. So all of these countries that were members of the USSR formerly have a very important Russian population. I thought that that the feelings of this area and to be part of Russia, that's what they want. And this makes that there was never a Ukraine identity there. This is not exactly a national unity, and that it's in their effort to construct. Who beyond Ukraine is not interested in a federalization of this country? Well, I think that right now Ukraine is a crosspoint between the interest of many sectors. Of course, many want to control Eastern Europe. Permite, digamos, como siempre, pues Estados Unidos a partir de su interés balcaniza unos países que pretende una. As I said, the United States is trying to balkanize this country, and the possible balkanization of the Ukraine would mean that they go closer to Russia. And just like the case of Yugoslavia, there has been a process of Balkanization. And the geopolitical game and the geoeconomical war is to make Crimea a port for the U.S. And when we speak of the U.S., we're also speaking of NATO, because NATO is nothing else than an appendix of the U.S. And what they wanted to do is to get rid of NATO.
Bueno, lo ha dicho Donald Trump, que no Estados Unidos.
And
Estados Unidos también una federación de intereses.
Eso es correcto. Eso es correcto. Ahora bien, Martín.
Okay, well,
hablando
Martín,
de la OTAN, todavía
speaking
se está
of
sintiendo
NATO,
la adhesión
we can
de
still
Crimea
feel
recientemente a Rusia.
the addition of Crimea to Russia. Well, for NATO, it was the key piece in this puzzle. And this is the control of NATO, and especially of what the peninsula means. Crimea has always been a step from Moscow, which is the center of Russia. It's geostrategically important. So Crimea is the fundamental key.
Ahora bien, regresando a esta reunión que recientemente
Going
terminó en
back to
París,
this
por
meeting
parte de los
that will be
integrantes
held in
del
Paris,
de Normandía, hay elementos allí que incluso
are there
se
elements
retoman
that
de los acuerdos de Minsk. ¿Por qué no han
are
sido
taken
cumplidos?
henceforth from the Minsk agreements? Well, I think it's hard, because the problem of the main thing is the zone, because we still don't know what's going to happen with them. Even in the south, they're not really involved right now. And this is a part where there is no identification. And now to set forth a law of these two provinces,
basándose en la experiencia de Crimea.
so what they do is they're based on the experience of Crimea.
96% en la votación, quiero decir.
Well, in population, it's like 96%, and likewise in territory. And there is no pro-Russian presence there. So what happens? If you, for example, if you go and open the door to a place where there's a lot of crowds, what would happen with the other religions? How is the control of Kiev through all of the other countries?
Otorgándole estos poderes locales a Donetsk y Lugansk.
And thinking if Donetsk has special powers, what do you think? Well, I think that we need bigger children. And this organization that is financed and supported by Europe and the UK, and they feel that they divide the country. I think that Ukraine is a monolithic government, and it's important to go to the recognition of all of these different ethnias and cultural groups. And of course, they would win a lot in stability. And I think that for everybody, including Russia, it would be a space for acceptance in regards to the peace that could come, or war that could come. I don't think there's a war in the horizon. I think that there's a lot of influence on behalf of the West and to try to change this the situation. There is the hate that they have is imported. I think the United States has been mining and there has been an agreement with you.
Ahora bien, llegamos ahora a la
Now,
época
let's go to the
Zelensky.
Zelensky
Yo le pido a
era.
Martín
I want to
establecer
ask
una comparación
Martin a
entre Volodymyr
comparison
Zelensky y
between
Tito
President Zelensky and Poroshenko.
Mira, yo creo que el
Well,
presidente actual
I think
tiene
that the
todavía
current president
que
still has
consolidar primero
to
su liderazgo.
consolidate
Entonces
consolidate
necesita resolver el problema de la
his
paz en
his
el
thing. So he first has to
Poroshenko era una
solve
persona que
the
ya
war in the
tenía
east.
posiciones ya más
Poroshenko
guerreristas, y
was
su
a bit more
consolidación como
military.
liderazgo estaba en el conflicto con Rusia. El actual presidente no estoy
The
seguro que
current
esa sea
president,
la
I'm
vía y
not
que sea
sure
el
if
camino,
that's the
porque no lo ha
correct way,
resuelto.
because I don't know, he hasn't
Ciertamente
done
hay
it yet.
una presión por parte de sectores conservadores
There
en
is a pressure
Ucrania
from the
para que
conservative areas
confronte
to,
a Rusia.
so he can confront Russia.
Por lo menos no sé si el concepto sería más moderado. Pero
Well, I don't know if
tiene
the
otra
concept is a
dinámica de
bit more
construcción,
modern,
de resolver el problema. Y
because
creo
what we
que
want to do is
su
we want to
estabilidad
solve
y
the
su paso en la
problem.
historia está en resolver el problema de la integración de estas dos provincias a Ucrania en una paz negociada,
We're,
por supuesto, porque no
that we're
podemos
trying to
negar-
find a negotiated peace process.
Mira, yo creo que el reconocimiento de la identidad cultural
And I think it's
de
important to
esta zona
recognize the
de Ucrania.
identity of this part of Ukraine. However, Zelensky says that Ukraine is only one. But of course, there is a big war that is a negotiation.
Del espacio de apertura de la negociación para otros casos, por supuesto, una negociación
And of
interna.
course, this
¿Cómo
negotiation
puedes llegar a un acuerdo de una federación o regiones autónomas
is how
en
some
Ucrania
autonomic
buscando la
regions
paz y
can find their
grupos
peace,
más radicales puedan dar un golpe de estado
and that the other
o una
more
acción
radical
violenta
movements
que
could
esclavice al
could
sistema
push forward a
para
coup
él.
d'état.
Es un juego complicado poder sostener su liderazgo.
So this is
sostener
why, and
una
they should
estabilidad
we
en
should all
toda
keep a
Ucrania,
stability
tomando en
in
cuenta
all
que
of
pueden entrar en
Ukraine,
un proceso de
bearing in mind
negociación
that they could go into a
con
negotiation process
Rusia y con esta
with
zona
Russia and the US.
autonomista o independentista.
Un proceso de negociación con Rusia donde también tendría que desterrar de su
In a
vocabulario
process where
el
they should
aquello de
also
que Crimea es
stop
un
this
territorio ilegal ocupado
stop
por
saying
Todo
that
eso, me
this
imagino
is
que
a
es
illegally
parte del
occupied
juego
territory.
a
Well,
mediano
all
y
of
largo
this
plazo.
has to do with the
Por supuesto que
long-term
Crimea es
strategy
muy
each
difícil
country
pensarse
has.
que
Of course,
Crimea es
Crimea is
parte
very
de
hard
Rusia.
to say, for them to say
Es
that they're
complicado
part
desde el
of
punto de vista
Russia.
de la unidad nacional y lo que el factor que los integra, pero ciertamente históricamente
Historically, Crimea,
jamás se sintió ucraniano.
along the
Ellos
that
lo saben,
feeling
lo saben los dirigentes ucranianos que Crimea era
Ukrainian,
parte de
they
Rusia,
feel
siempre buscó
that they're part
vínculos con Rusia
of
y consumó un
of
hecho que ellos
Crimea.
sabían y que Occidente, muchos de los
And everybody
textos
knew.
desclasificados, se dice que de alguna manera
It is
Crimea
said that in
alguna
some
vez
way,
iba a ser parte de
Crimea
volver
was going to
a parte
was
de
going to be part
Creo
of
que
Russia
es
once
difícil
again.
ello, pero que yo creo que toda esta parte de la negociación, igual que la negociación en términos
Well,
más
I think
amplios,
that
de
this
Rusia
the
y
sense that
y el suministro del
the
gas,
negotiation
por
and the
supuesto,
supply
que-
of gas,
que Rusia no le quite el papel
of
de
course,
puente,
Russia won't give him
gasífero
this
a Ucrania por
this
parte
part
de
of being a
Occidente.
port.
Cuando las tensiones, digamos que se intensificaron,
When the
hubo
protests got more
comentarios
intense, there were
provenientes de
some
Rusia
comments
diciendo, bueno,
on behalf of
que
Russia.
va a haber personas que van a pasar
So I
mucho
think
frío,
there were going
¿no?
to be
En la
many
parte
people who were
ucraniana.
going to be
No, y
very
seguro,
cold
pero
that
no
night.
solamente por la ausencia del gas, sino por el paso.
Well,
porque
of course,
el
not
uso
only
del
because
paso
there's
del
no
gas
gas,
es un
but also
producto
because
económico también. El derecho de paso le da
this right to have a
un país que está en
chili
crisis,
sauce was
que
terrible
ciertamente
because
de una crisis
everybody
económica
was
muy
almost
severa.
crying.
Lo decías, digamos, la migración de personas
As we
técnicas,
said,
tanto a Rusia como a Europa,
the
ha
migration to
colocado-
Europe
Migración
and
arrastrada
Africa,
desde fuera.
por supuesto, esas guerras migratorias que se están dando inclusive en el mismo Venezuela, en el
and all of
mismo
this,
Centroamérica y en
everything that we
Ucrania,
see
como
day by
Venezuela.
day in Venezuela.
Robos de cerebro, pero también mano calificada, trabajadores inclusive hasta dispuestos al trabajo.
And
más
even
barato en
the
algunas
way
de-
they're willing to
Entonces,
go
todo
forth
eso
with
ha
the
surgido
president.
en Ucrania y esto
Well,
la
everything
cuestión
has
que
come
dice,
forward.
su papel industrial, su peso
Well,
industrial está bastante decaído.
Everything is
Estuvo siempre muy
downhill.
vinculado a Rusia. Al quebrar la relación de Ucrania con Rusia, esa integración industrial se quebró, no se integra,
Well, when
no se
that
integra
happened,
a la Unión Europea.
There was
Esto
no way
fue
out by
tecnología,
that
otro
time.
diseño. Y Rusia ha sabido cómo alentar un proceso de sustitución de los elementos que eran ucranianos. Entonces Ucrania se queda
So Ukraine
prácticamente sin
has
mercado
practically
de
no
muchos de sus
market,
productos, sin tecnología
and most of
para
their
poder
technology
exportar.
to export.
Y rompe la vinculación
And they
histórica
cut
que
the
tenía con Rusia. Entonces, para ellos es una
historical
situación económica muy,
dialogue
muy
with
difícil.
Bolivia.
El aporte agrícola a Rusia, que era también significativo, Rusia ha aumentado sus niveles de producción agrícola en forma
Yes, so
importante.
in
Ya
fact,
no
they have
necesitan del
improved.
granero ucraniano
Russia has
dentro
improved
de
their
la dinámica
production,
geopolítica
and they're not
occidental.
so
Siempre se
dependent
dijo
on the
que
grain life
separar
of
Ucrania
Ukraine.
De la Unión
Rusia
Soviética.
implicaba el fin de Rusia y de la Unión
And with
Soviética,
this,
pero
there would
también
be
de
an
Rusia,
end to
por
Russia
supuesto,
and,
del imperio, de todo lo que significaría Rusia
as
como
Jet said,
unidad
well, of
geopolítica.
course, Russia as a
Rusia ha
unity,
demostrado que tiene una capacidad enorme de transformación y de subsistencia, ¿no? Y ya no necesitan necesariamente todo el aporte
they
que da
don't
Ucrania para
necessarily
su
need
subsistencia. Pueden
everything that
aportar en el
Harding
comercio
needs.
internacional,
Exactamente.
pero ya no es de vital importancia.
Of course,
para
but
Rusia.
now it's not of
Así es,
vital
refiriendo
importance
a
for
la Federación
Russia.
A la
Rusia.
Federación de Rusia.
Muy bien. Ahora, no quisiera pasar por alto la participación de estos otros dos países.
And now I would
Francia
like to have the
y Alemania.
participation of
¿Qué
these other
intereses
two
políticos
countries,
hay
France
de que se
and
resuelva,
Europe. Could you please help us with
el
their
conflicto
positions?
en el Donbass?
Yo veo que, digamos, hay primero el liderazgo de los dos países que conducen
Well, there
la
is
Unión Europea.
some
La Unión
leadership
Europea
of
es
both
Alemania y
countries.
Francia en alianza.
Exactamente.
Históricamente son los que construyeron la Unión Europea y la que la impulsan.
Y que de manera muy coordinada últimamente
And
han
this is a
trabajado,
very coordinated way.
Emmanuel Macron y Angela Merkel.
Claro, pero también por enfrentamiento con Trump.
Ujú,
O sea,
tal cual.
la necesidad de defenderse de Trump
The need to
implica
defend each other is
consolidar la unidad geopolítica y
a
de
demand that you
potencia
find some other job, not only
occidental,
this.
y la necesidad de un no conflicto con Rusia, que siempre para los europeos siempre ha sido como
And,
su enemigo, su leitmotiv de
Crimea has always
enemistad
seen
permanente,
Russia as their
que siente que se
enemy,
los va a comer y
and they
todo ese
feel that they're
tipo
going to
de-
be eaten by
Para
them.
mantener al oso dormido.
y bueno,
So it would be much better to have the bear asleep. And at least the alliances, they should have a friendly and prosperous friendship. And this goes through solving the problem in Ukraine and the Donbass, solving the economic crisis, and Russia is a very important market to export.
Tanto en tecnología como productos agrícolas. El primero que sintió
So the
realmente
first
el problema agrícola fue Europa.
country
Cuando
who
dejó
felt the
exportar
economic
frutas,
problem was
habían
Europe,
grandes cantidades de
because they no
sectores
longer
agrícolas,
could produce and
europeos
sell it
que solo exportaban a
to
Rusia.
to
Cuando vino
Europe.
las sanciones a Rusia por
When
el tema de
the-
Crimea y de la crisis en el Donbass,
when there were
el que
some
se vio afectado fue buena parte
sanctions,
de los sectores agrícolas. No solamente
the
Rusia,
part
sino el
of
sector
the
agrícola de la Unión
agriculture
Europea.
part was
Eso lo quieren
one of the
retomar
most hit.
ante la crisis y el conflicto con Trump. Entonces, por supuesto, hay una necesidad de Europa de pacificar todo su
And it's an
espacio,
interest
integrar
of
nuevos
trying to
mercados,
integrate new
integrar
markets
en este sentido
and pacify the
Rusia
area.
a una alianza estratégica, por supuesto, o comercial, donde pasa por la solución de estos elementos.
And what they want to do is solve these elements. Thank you very much, Martín.
Para la audiencia de la jugada crítica.
Gracias a ti.
Vamos a conclusiones.
Let's go to our conclusions.
Mientras el gobierno de
While
Zelensky se muestra
Zelensky's
firme en
government is
ceder el
firm
respaldo del
and does
territorio
not want to
no
give in any
cierto
part of the
que se aparta
territory,
un poco de
it is
su
also
antecesor,
true
Petro
that
Poroshenko.
if
El rey del
Poroshenko
chocolate, que con espíritu nacionalista
if Poroshenko
llegó a la
sees
presidencia cuando las
these
calderas del
people,
Euromaidán aún no se habían
and
enfriado.
let's not
El
forget
ahora
that he
excomediante
gets to
evidencia
the
mayor
war
disposición
when
a
it was
una
uprising.
política con las regiones
He passed from
fronterizas,
being a
pero habrá que
comedian,
darle
and
seguimiento
now
a cómo
he's
cumpliremos en lo acordado
driving a
en París,
pickup truck.
sobre
And
todo lo
we're going to have to
referente
give
a
him
cómo
an
se estabiliza el
opportunity to
fuego.
see how
Como
important
también habrá que observar
this is,
que
and
la
we'll also have
reacción
to
de Occidente.
we'll have
No
to
podemos olvidar que el fantasma
analyze
de la OTAN
the
sigue merodeando
the
por
reflections
estas
of
tierras
you.
muy próximas a Rusia y todo cuidado digo es poco. Por hoy cerramos el
For
tema
now,
de
this is
política.
all.
Hasta la próxima.
I'll see you the next time.